It's summer and it's time to travel to the great outdoors. Whether you're going to Joshua Tree or going backpacking on the Appalachian Trail, you're going to want to get photos by day and night. That's right, at night.
At night.
And if you know anything about taking photos at night, it's that it's a challenge and that they don't always look the best. It doesn't always feel like it's the best time to take photos. We're gonna fix that though. Whether or not you know how to shoot in manual mode, by the end of this video, you're gonna be able to take night photos of the stars, and if you stay to the end, you'll even know how to set up photos of you and your friends in the shot. Let's get it. If you're new here, I'm Mike, nurse photographer and videographer, and I make videos about camera gear and tutorials for new photo and video shooters. Alright, let's address the elephant in the room with nighttime photography. It's lack of light. As soon as the sun goes down and it seems like we don't have enough of it, we are still able to get some light. Trust me. Alright, so what kind of gear do you need? You need a camera with manual mode, and it has to have a self-timer mode on the camera. Most cameras have them, you just need to know how to enable that setting. Any lens will do, but a prime lens that stops down to like an f2.8 is at least preferable. A tripod, mini or even regular size, you just need something to keep your camera still. Although we can use most gear to take photos of the stars, for the best results, what are some principles that we can follow in order to take some good low light photos of them? Well, first of all, it's a low shutter speed. This will allow the sensor to take in as much light as possible. So instead of taking photos at like 1/1000th of a second, you're taking like a shutter speed of 1 second, 10 seconds, anything like that. Widest aperture. This will let in more light through the lens, and that's usually by that f-stop number. So if you got f2.8, that aperture is way bigger than if the aperture was like at f22, which is like a very small size. Infinity focus. This is a manual lens that clearly shows you that there's an infinity distance here, which is as far as it can go. But even if you have a more electronic lens that just has a focus by wire system, you can still switch your camera to manual, and it should let you know when your lens has hit that infinity stop or that infinity distance. This will just make sure everything in your landscape is in focus. And then to add to all of this, just a sprinkle of ISO or increasing your ISO will provide more light for the overall image. And if you're gonna shoot with a model, a friend, or all of you, using a flashlight or a lantern can also help out your photo. All right, let me show you how to program your camera on manual mode. That's right, we're going to the big M. Depending on your camera, you wanna crank down your shutter dial or shutter speed lower until it says like 1 second. If you need more light, you wanna crank it down to like 3 seconds, 5 seconds, or even 10 seconds if you have to. For aperture, you want to set it as low as it can go, as wide as it can be. And for this lens, I have it set to f2.8, which is as low as it can go. Do note though that if you're using like a kit lens and that's the only lens you got, and you're shooting at f3.5 or 3.5, you will want to compensate with a shutter speed that is 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or more, just so that you can get a cleaner image. But if you can stop down to like f2.8, f1.8, you can leave your shutter speed alone for the time being. Alright, so using all these settings, this will allow the most light that we can get through the lens into the camera sensor. It's not a strict rule of what aperture or shutter speed that you need, but the more light, the better. And that's why the last thing that we're going to change about this camera is that sprinkle of ISO. You'll want to set it in between somewhere of 1600 and 6400. You could go higher to raise the sensitivity of your sensor for the light to make it much brighter, but do note that the higher the ISO, the more grain will be introduced into your image. If I only need to keep my ISO at 1600 and the image looks great, fine, I'll leave it alone. Anything more than that, I'll try to lower my shutter speed. Alright fam, we're almost there. Focus. If your lens has an autofocus manual focus switch, you want to set it of course to manual focus, and then set it to infinity as we talked about, so it'll go as far as it can to see the stars. And the last thing that you need to change is your shooting mode. This is where you'll often find your self-timer. This will reduce the camera shake that occurs after you hit the shutter button. A 2-second timer should be just fine. Unless you're running into the photo, maybe take 10 seconds. Alright, that's it. So your settings should look something like this on your camera. Your shutter speed should be like a second, up to 20 seconds. Aperture is f1.8 up to f2.8, or as low as it can be. The ISO is 1600 up to 6400. Self-timer mode is set to 2 seconds. Manual focus, infinity. As I recently went backpacking in the Appalachian Trail, I was practicing my nighttime photography with my A7S III paired with my Samyang 14mm f2.8 Mark II. Before I get into the samples, I know I mentioned that you can boost your ISO up to 6400, but for me, since I was using the A7S III, a camera well known for its low light performance, I cranked my ISO twice as high at 12,800. And here is how they turned out. With enough experimenting with different shutter speeds and ISO settings, I was able to take the photos that I liked. You can take these photos too, but there are some things you should know about photos of stars with you and your friends. Before you do that, leave a like on this video if you're getting value so far, and let me know in the comment section, where's the next travel destination that you're gonna go and possibly take photos of stars. Alright, so how do you take photos of stars and people? One of the challenges that you're going to face while taking photos at night with lower shutter speeds or slower shutter speeds is the motion blur you get when your subject is bobbing back and forth, even though it's very subtle. Even if you're standing still, you're going to see in the shot that your model is moving back and forth. In other words, your model ain't going to be sharp in the photo. For this reason, apply the sample principles mentioned before, and I would leave my shutter speed between 1 to 3 seconds. I mean, if your model can stand as still as a life-size cutout of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, feel free to slow that shutter speed down to 5 seconds or longer. Another challenge is how to pose for the person without overexposing. So there's light in the sky, slowing the shutter speed can capture that light from there. However, there isn't any light to expose for our model. So we have to introduce light in front of our model. How I did that was bouncing light off of myself, like so. As you can see in this photo, from my blue light glasses, there is a light source really in front of me. And how we ended up pulling that off was one of my friends was taking their cell phone and turning on that flashlight and just literally bouncing it off their jacket. It wasn't any particular color. And then that light reflected off his jacket and bounced onto me. With the camera settings that we have, again, you don't need a crazy amount of light. It's all just gonna collect and expose for our image properly. As a recap, to take clear photos of the sky, you need a slow shutter speed, make sure those numbers have those quotation marks following the numbers. Opening up the aperture, that number should be as low as possible. For ISO, although this does give us screen in our photos, most images are still good at 1600. And then for your focus, if your landscape is still blurry, switch your lens to manual focus and make sure it's at infinity. But most importantly, don't forget your tripod. Want to take advantage of your camera and take better looking photos? Take a look over here at my photo tutorials and maybe some tutorials over here too. Thanks again for watching. Now go out there and shoot for the life that matters. See ya.